I was going to set it up and say, welcome to the Unaddiction podcast. Not sure if you know, but I have a book coming out in January and it's called Unaddiction. And unaddiction is a word that we made up, which is what do we need to unlearn about addiction that we think we know? What stigmas do we need to undo? And what conversations do we need to uncover if we really want to make a difference in this addiction crisis that we're experiencing? And so we're doing this podcast to drive awareness to that book and also to talk to people who are living their own journey of recovery with this idea that there is an infinite number of ways to be in recovery and people are living in recovery, and we want to have those voices showcased and give people ideas for things that they might want to try that might work in their lives. So thank you for joining us. And maybe we could start out with telling our listeners, who is Phil Rutherford and how did you come to be who you are?
Wow, that's a seems like a loaded question.
I know, it's like very
Do we have 17?
psychiatrist of me.
Right. Do we have 17 hours to unpack the first 10 years of my life? No.
Yes, we
I
do.
I actually think I actually think that I'm one of the lucky ones. I
Mm,
think that I my journey to get where I am today was definitely aided by um, good health care, a loving family, and
mm,
an opportunity to recover. And I think one of the reasons I do what I do is that there are plenty of people that don't have access to good health care
mhm,
and don't have access to opportunities to just to get well. Right. I think garden variety substance use disorder, nothing particularly special about that. It appeared in my teens. I think
mm,
I brought it with me into high school and early attempts at college. I used to say that at any given time in my certainly in my freshman year, my blood alcohol level was higher than my GPA,
mm.
and I went through it, you know. But I think in my case, my people, my mom is a psychologist, so she knew a little bit about what was wrong with me, and got me into treatment early and often, right? Which
Mhm.
that's I don't know if that's a saying, but I think treatment early and often is probably a good rule of thumb, because if nothing
Agree.
else, it probably preserved me. I think it gave me an opportunity to do some things. And you know what? I mean, let's keep it real. I'm socialized in a way that made treatment possible for me, which is,
Say more
this is
about that, Phil.
yes, this is another thing that is really important to me. So, um, I did not get put out of treatment because of the way that I am. I know how to move in white circles and
Mm,
speak white language, and I
mhm,
hate to say it that way, but one of the things that I see as I go around the country and do this work is that there are plenty of treatment environments that are not necessarily friendly or available to
mhm,
men that look like me,
And by
and
men who look
because
like you, because we can just talk straight on this podcast. So
oh
tell us what you mean, Phil.
and I apologize because we're even though we're podcasting, we're on video, so you can see me, but I
Uh-huh.
suppose your listeners can't. I
Right.
I am a black man
Yep.
living in long term recovery, and it is very important to me that other black men are given the same opportunity
Yes.
to recover from a healthcare issue that actually has fairly high recovery rates. One of the things that I get to do is I interact with SAMHSA a lot, and very recently they came out with some data around recovery from substance use disorder,
Mm-hmm.
and their sample size was valid. Their data says that of people that ever in their lifetime identify as having a problem with substances, including alcohol, 70% of those people have found
Uh-huh.
some measure of recovery. So that's higher than diabetes. That's higher than hypertension. That's higher than a whole host of other chronic illnesses. So what that
Boom.
tells
That
me,
sounds like what we need to unlearn that we
right,
think we know is that people don't recover from substance use disorders.
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Even inside of our community, like for a long time, I heard the phrase "recovery is possible,"
Mm-hmm.
and that's true, and it's a wonderful sentiment. But I know math, and if something is 70%, that's a
Mm.
probability. That's
Come
not a
on.
possibility.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm passionate about that, and I'm passionate about culturally specific pathways because I didn't finish telling the rest of my story, which is
Please
yes,
go ahead.
I found treatment early and often, and I don't know if that's how it needs to be for everybody, but I did. Um, but I think one of the things that finally got me from the treatment cycle into the recovery cycle
Mm.
is that I met a man in Minneapolis that looked like me, another black man,
Mm-hmm.
and he brought me. And it's kind of a funny story. One of the first things I said to him, because he asked me about, what do I do in my recovery pathway and blah blah blah. We didn't call it recovery pathways back then, but he just said, "What do I do?"
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned something about mutual aid, 12 step. And I said, "Oh, that doesn't work. That's for white folks."
Mm.
And and to his credit, and to this day, I mean, he and I we're still the best of friends. He didn't say anything. He brought me to a meeting in South Minneapolis of about 40. It was a men's meeting, about 40 black men um, in recovery.
Wow.
And
Wait a minute. In Minneapolis? This
in
is
Minneapolis, right,
remarkable.
right. And something, and he never said anything. He never, to this day, he's never said anything about it. He's never said, "Well, I did that to
Mm-hmm.
show you," or none of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But but what it did for me was that it was an excuse buster, right? I couldn't have that excuse anymore because the problem with mutual aid, the problem with any of those things, it has nothing to do necessarily with race. While there may be race problems in 12 step, I'm not trying to argue that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not what was stopping me from getting well. What was stopping me from getting well was my own thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've since come to, and I've been in the 12 step rooms during George Floyd and all of that, and
Mm.
had people tell me race is an outside issue, and me tell them, every time I bring my black ass in here,
It's
I'm an
black.
inside issue. Yeah,
Right.
I can't be anything other than black in here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying it's not without challenge, but that event for me made a difference, and it helped shape me, and he kept me in the company of other black men that were in recovery and sort of pursuing the same path. So
This is so incredibly important. And so we talk about, we meaning in this book, all of these different inputs to the development of addiction. And so all of the different outputs, that lead to a path to recovery. And part of it is exactly this, which is that cultural, racial, ethnic, socio-political inputs matter and community matters, right? And so there's this whole chapter we do on weathering, which is like the impact of racism and discrimination as independently quantified on your risk for developing a chronic health condition, whether that's addiction or something else, and for the negative outcomes that Black people see in all of these different health outcomes and how the environment and lack of opportunity to get healthy is the way that you phrased it, which I love, is really driving that. And so I want to use this as a segue, Phil, because you're with Faces and Voices of Recovery.
correct.
And what that person did for you was show you a face of recovery that looked like yours 40 times over in that 12 step meeting. And so, can you talk to me about the work you're doing these days to show the faces and voices of recovery so that people can see themselves in that and the difference that you think that makes?
Absolutely, and I'm going to try not to make this convoluted. I'm going to do my best here because there's a bit of a nuance in what you just said.
Mm,
I my my day job is at Faces and Voices of Recovery. I'm the chief operating officer. I do that sort of work there. In 2020, it became apparent to me that I needed to do more. That
Mm,
wasn't enough. That
mhm,
managing a nationwide effort toward reducing stigma, uh, sort of in large scale, was not enough.
mm,
I started a group called Black Faces, Black Voices,
mhm,
um, and this again, this was not an attempt to do any. And I guess it's just sort of the nature of America. Whenever you say something, I'm going to do something that is pro-black. There's the zero sum game mentality that it is in some way anti some other group. It's not. But
mhm,
it became apparent to me that I needed to do something specifically around uh, recovery and recovery opportunities for Black communities, which
mhm,
is what Black Faces, Black Voices is. It is a recovery collaborative of professionals around the country that bring this work into community. So
mm,
what we do is we look for opportunities to drive resources into Black communities around the country. Now, like I said, I could talk at length about the big picture federal policy work that I do at Faces and Voices, and by this time, everyone in federal spaces knew that I was about to talk about equity whenever I opened my mouth. So
mhm.
it's kind of a, it's kind of a both and thing for me. But I think it's important just to point out that that's really what that's really what the that's where my heart is. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, let's
My
talk
heart is
about your
there.
heart. Let's talk about your heart. So, how does Black? Oh, I just knocked my microphone over, y'all.
No,
So, how does Black Faces Black Recovery? Is this the
Black
name of
faces,
the organization?
Black faces, Black voices.
Black Faces Black Voices. How does Black Faces Black Voices increase opportunity for recovery? How do you bring those
So,
opportunities to the community?
well, we do a couple of different things. So our members are actually people operating recovery organizations around the country.
Mm-hmm.
So our membership includes, uh, I want to say that there are, at last count, there are about 75 different organizations that are part of this collaborative. So we're doing everything from direct peer-to-peer services. We're doing policy advocacy. Right now, we're running a couple of research projects where we're looking. The one research project that is the largest is that we are studying the criminal legal system and the
Mm-hmm.
effects that it has on Black women in 5 states.
Mm,
So New York, Michigan, Texas, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. We're looking at specifically what recovery supports exist for Black women transiting the criminal legal system, and we're trying to, there are all sorts of things that influence policy. Obviously, research influences policy, um, and we're trying to come at it from a number of different angles. But at the end of the day, the direct service that's happening at these organizations, and the thing is, Black Faces, Black Voices didn't start these organizations, but we have collected them, and
mm,
we're attempting to operate in a little bit more of a unified front, and conceivably drive funding in a little bit more of a unified way.
mm-hmm. I love that you said, this is my heart, right? And so when I think about a life of recovery from whatever chronic condition,
Yep,
addiction included, really at the center of that is life meaning, purpose, and community. Do you share the same kind of thinking?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think the most important thing, and there's always there are component parts of our lives that we can mesh together, right? So obviously, I am a person with substance use disorder,
Mm-hmm.
and that is, it's important to me that I don't want people to die. Period. That's not about
Mm-hmm.
race or anything. I want human suffering to lessen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the thing that I am uniquely qualified to do, and the place where my voice can ring the truest, is in the space of working with Black communities and trying to get resources there. Because the truth of the matter, it sounds to me like you are connected with current statistics. Um, the overdose rate in this country
Mm-hmm.
is in specifically in Black communities is skyrocketing, and it's not.
800%.
Yeah, so I want to help everyone, but much like the question of if you're in a neighborhood and there's a house on fire, you don't send fire trucks to all the other houses. You send the fire trucks to the house that's on fire.
Mm-hmm.
I want that. I want to address that, and I want to make sure all the other houses are safe. But I want this house to stop burning, and that's kind of what that. So yes, I agree with your statement. Yes, this is where my heart is, and I can do both. I can support recovery theater wide, and I can sort of bring specific attention to Black communities.
Yes, absolutely. My son is just started his freshman year of college, and he's my what can I say, like, heady son,
Yep.
philosophical guy, right? And so we were having some conversation about equity and racism and impact on life and health. And similar to your example that you just used, like, I want the fire truck to go to the house that's on fire. He said, yeah, mom, I'm talking to my friends and I'm like, if this person needs a Band-Aid and this person needs CPR, I'm not going to give everybody a Band-Aid and I'm not going to give everybody CPR.
Right. Right.
Right?
That's wonderful. That's
Right?
wonderful. Yep. And
Um,
that's the thing.
yeah, that's the thing. When you look at kind of what the face and voice, even of the opioid use disorder crisis, certainly the wider substance use disorder crisis has been, I think Black communities would not know the disproportionate impact that this opioid crisis has had in Black communities.
Yep. Speaking specifically of that, I
Mm-hmm.
just came from the Drug Policy Alliance conference in Phoenix, which is a wonderful thing. Beautiful to see the work that's getting done there. But I was on a panel with a couple of folks, and one of the things that we talked about was there's the broader messaging of yes, overdose crisis, yes, people are dying, yes, we need to do something about it. But inside of the Black community, we have work to do specifically around awareness
Mm-hmm.
and around the opioid crisis itself. There's
Mm-hmm.
internal work that needs to be done there. Um, and I usually ask this question when I'm in the broader community about vigils, and this usually makes it very clear. We think about the overdose vigils. I see a lot of pictures of people with candles. I always ask people, how many Black faces do you see in those vigils in the
Mm-hmm.
pictures? And you don't.
Mm-hmm.
But that's weird because the numbers are increasing. So why
Right.
don't we see those? And we don't see those because a lot of times, and it's not every community is all Black or 100% Black folks. That's not what it is. But as a people, we're over policed
Mm-hmm.
and typically prosecuted differently. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not as easy just to get out there and say, "Yep, my son has an opioid use disorder and he was shooting dope in the back room, and this is what happened."
Right.
That's a little bit more. It's a more complex thing to have that discussion with other family members. So
Mm-hmm.
and with other community members. So another something else we're working on at Black Faces Black Voices is trying to have those dialogues. We're doing a thing called well, we don't call them Chicago dinners, but they're modeled after the Chicago dinner,
Mm-hmm.
where we get people around the table in community and start talking about that and talk about what does it mean to say my child has an opioid use disorder. What does
Mm-hmm.
it mean to talk about and I'll start there, but the next iteration of that is, what does it mean to say my child is practicing harm reduction,
Sure.
right? What does
Yes.
it
Take
mean
us
to
all the
go
way there, Phil.
what does it
Come
mean
on,
to
we
go
keep it
to
real on this podcast. Take it all the way there.
what does it mean to go to a Black church and ask, can we do safer supplies? Can we
Mm-hmm.
talk about wound care? I mean, so
Mm-hmm.
there's the entire spectrum of healthcare remedies that are affecting and that we're using to reduce the impact of the overdose crisis and the opioid crisis those need to be brought to the Black community as well. It's unacceptable to me that they're not there,
That's
because
right.
there's some of that stuff that works. So
That's right.
let's do the stuff that works. So anyway, I feel like I'm preaching. So I'm
Well, I mean, if you preaching, I'm singing because I'm the choir. Okay.
but
So directly related to what you were just saying, like, and the first conversation is just about the illness. Let's not even talk about harm reduction, but let's talk about harm reduction. I was just in Philadelphia, and I went to visit the Kensington community, which has garnered nationwide coverage on what they call, quote, the open drug market. But it really is this area of Philadelphia where people with active addiction are on the street. And I spent some time volunteering at this organization. I'll shout them out, called Savage Sisters, and they do
I know
wound
them.
care. Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So we were doing wound care and handing out safe supplies. And when I went back and was reflecting, we probably saw about 20 or 30 people who were in the street in this quarter block in the Kensington community. And there was not one single Black person. And as I was reflecting, I said to myself, I believe there is not one single Black person, because if this was a collection of 30 Black people on this street, the police response would be very different.
Well, of course, and that's the complexity.
Yes.
That is the complexity, and I we should be ashamed of ourselves for not pushing harder on this. This is a place where, like, it is unacceptable to me that a place like Kensington. First of all, we should be ashamed of ourselves for allowing a place like Kensington to exist.
Mm-hmm.
There are better models for that. I don't know if you're familiar with On Point Harlem and On Point Washington Heights, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
these are overdose prevention centers. But
Yeah. Tell us about it, because our listeners may not be.
so these are places in both of these places are in New York. Um, and these are places where people can go and safely use substances. Now,
Mm-hmm.
before, I want to be clear, full disclosure, I had one opinion of the place before I went in there, and I
Mm.
walked out with a very different feeling.
Okay.
So
Well,
it is
go ahead and give us before and after,
okay.
Phil.
So before, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in here, and it's just a bunch of people getting high.
Mm-hmm.
And I walk in the door, and there's a room full of people, and there's a line, and they're waiting to go back in the back area. And I assume they're waiting to go and use substances. And I was going to tour, so they took me around and they showed me the room, and the room looked a lot like an office cubicle. The rooms for people to use looked a lot like office cubicles,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a room for people that were smoking that has some kind of high tech ventilation in it,
Mm-hmm.
so the particulates couldn't get out. They have a mass. One of the interesting things there is they have a mass spectrometer at the door, so whatever your sample is, you can test it, so you know what you're actually consuming.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just the first floor. This is a 3-floor building. So then they take me to the other part of the first floor, which is healthcare. So if you have wounds, you get your wounds cared for. If you got other healthcare needs, you can get seen there. Then they took me to the second floor, which is yoga. They were doing the NADA acupuncture that the Black
Mm.
Panthers did for drug treatment. They have other workout rooms. There's other stuff there. They got job skills training, all this other stuff going on. And so my opinion started to change. And then they were telling me about their statistics that about 40% of the people that go there to use substances. And more than half of the people that go there for the services. They don't go there to use substances. And I just and as I was walking out of there, two things occurred to me. Thing number one, they don't have overdoses there. Nobody's
Mm.
dying there. Thing number
Mm.
two, nobody's getting killed by the cops
Mm.
there. No one's being murdered by police there. As a matter of fact, the police know about the place. They're happy about it. They
Bring people
they're
there.
yes, they're excited. If people start falling out, they will bring substances to them to test at the mass spectrometer to see what the fentanyl content is. So I walked out of there like every city should have one of these.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the real life thing of, okay, if I'm going to put this in a community, and this is in Harlem, right? I'm on 100, I think it's 126th Street in
Mm-hmm.
Harlem. So I'm in a black neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be done, but I walked out of there thinking that we're doing it completely wrong, because people are not dying and getting the help that they need in a way that is not so stigmatized and judgmental. So I'm a fan.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So time always flies when I'm having these conversations. And so I want to make sure I don't miss this opportunity. I usually say at the very beginning, so this is my bad, Phil, for not giving you a full heads up. I do that little intro about the word we made up, unaddiction. What do we need to unlearn? What stigmas do we need to undo? What conversations do we need to uncover? And I say, at the end of the podcast, I'm going to ask you for one thing you want us to unlearn, or one stigma you want us to undo, or one conversation you want us to uncover. So I usually do that at the beginning. I see your brain ticking. Don't tell me right now. I'm going to ask you at the end, which is about, we got about 10 more minutes to spend with each other. That's what I'm going to ask you before we get out of here. What I want to ask you now is, because part of what I feel very passionately about, there used to be this idea that there was only one way to be in recovery. And what
Yes.
I think we know, I heard your deep, heavy sigh. So I think you feel the question that's coming. I think we are coming to understand that that is not the case. So can you talk to us about um, what your formula for recovery is for Phil, in case people who are listening might hear something that they're like, oh, maybe I want to try that, or maybe I want to mention that to somebody I know who's formulating their own formula right now.
Um, so there are a bunch of thoughts going through my head. So I want to qualify my answer with a very important component, and that component is time.
Mm,
Because I think we talk a lot about the pathways of recovery, and where I am today is not where I started.
mm-hmm,
Where I started, um, I just wanted a way out. I needed a way out. A way out was presented. I took the way out. That, for
mm-hmm.
me, that way out was 12 step. That's really all that was presented. I think church was an option, but I'm a heathen, so that wasn't going to go. So I hope my mom's not listening to this and get
I'm
mad,
gonna
but
send this to your mama.
you get popped upside the head at Thanksgiving.
See?
You know, I taught you better than that, boy.
Right.
So anyway, so that was the pathway that was available to me. And I started in an abstinence based. You got to stop. I say this without reservation. I am a stimulant use disorder is my, that's how I got here.
Mm-hmm,
Specifically, cocaine use disorder. That's what brought me to my knees and brought me into a place of needing recovery again and again. So
mm-hmm,
it wasn't like a one time thing. I said treatment early and often. Okay. That is what started me in on down the recovery pathway. Since that time, I have had the opportunity of seeing so many other beautiful ways that people recover, including harm reduction pathways.
mm-hmm.
I had a wonderful conversation. I know this is going to sound odd to people that are sort of wed to this abstinence based thing, which I'm no longer wed to that. I mean, it is what I practice today, but I'm not wed to it because I've seen so many other people have success in other ways. What I know is what works for me is obviously that substance does not work for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm convinced. I've done enough field research. I'm convinced on that. It is an evidence based practice that
The
that
evidence is conclusive.
yes, the evidence is conclusive on that. But I've come into contact with people over the years. So not like just one guy that showed up one time, but I've come into contact with a guy over a period of 6 or 7 years now that is someone that recreationally uses other substances.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually not just one guy, but a number of people that do that recreationally, but they seem to be able to manage the rest of their life. And I think one of the biggest mistakes, and I'm not leaning into unlearning, but one of the biggest mistakes that people with substance use disorder make is the assumption that my reality is your reality.
Mm.
That's not true.
I think
My
that might
reality
just
is my
be people
reality.
in general. People with
Yeah.
substance use disorders, yes, but I think that's like a human condition.
Yeah, it's not true.
Yep.
And the thing is, it's okay if I just think that in my head and I never say anything, but unfortunately, we have policymakers
Hmm.
um, operating from that perspective. We have people routinely sentencing people to treatment that doesn't work for them. You got
Right.
people sending black males to treatment where the fallout rate for black males is 98%, and
Right.
then reincarcerating them when the thing that happens to 98% of the people that go there happens to them,
Hmm.
and then the judge says you're non-compliant, so
It's
you got to
you.
go back to prison. Right.
Right.
So
98% says it's not me.
right.
98% says it's you.
So it's not it is. So I guess I said all that to say my pathway. I started in 12 steps where I came. I still participate there. I participate in some harm reduction groups as well, just because I understand the importance of allowing pathways for people that don't necessarily get it the way that I got it. I'm associated with a group called Eight Dimensions of Recovery,
Mm.
where we don't really talk about use or not use. We talk about wellness in the dimensions of intellectual, social,
Mm.
emotional, physical, environmental, occupational, and financial. I think that's
Mm.
eight. Anyway, those. So our meetings every week are just about that. We have people in there that use substances and people that don't, but we don't
Hmm.
care. We're interested in, are you well? And
Hmm.
that's really kind of so that's what I mean. Like, where you start isn't necessarily where you finish. So I may have started in abstinence, but today I'm in wellness. Like, where am
Yes.
I well in those eight dimensions? Am I helping other human beings? Am I giving back to my community? And when I'm doing all those things, I'm good. And the I also have a secret weapon in that at Faces and Voices, we've been studying recovery outcomes since 2017.
Hmm.
We've been collecting data on it, and we can see in our data that there is not a straight line connection between abstinence and improvement. And I will not say social determinants of health, because I think that's a bunch of the structural or political determinants of health that exist. We
Yes.
see improvements in those areas regardless of use or lack of use. So when there's a tighter connection or a tighter correlation between stable housing and stable employment to overall satisfaction of life than there is to stable housing and abstinence. So the data tells me that. My life experience tells me that. I know that that's not the only thing, and it's really important to me that I make room for people to get well however they need to get well.
So what you did there, which was so important, which is actually a massive frame shift for healthcare, the recovery community, the treatment community, is that you made the target outcome satisfaction with life. Whereas the target outcome has been cessation of drug use. It's a huge, massive, necessary frame shift if we actually want to be like, is it just important to us that people don't use drugs, but they're still suffering? Or is it important to us that people are not suffering?
Well, I think there's some willful ignorance there, and I'll tell you why I
Mm,
say that. Because so if you look at someone with alcohol, and part of it too is just like just not understanding the science. But if you look at someone with alcohol use disorder and they're drinking to the point where they have physical consequences, right? There's a
mm-hmm,
liver problem, there's some sort of esophageal problem, there's something associated with that. You can make a good faith argument that if you remove that toxin from their liver or from their esophagus, that those health components will improve.
mm-hmm.
Now, you haven't done anything about their quality of life, you haven't done anything about their overall satisfaction, but you can make a case that if you take that substance away, that particular organ
Sure.
will improve. Um, and if you stop there, that's okay, but that's a very 1920s kind of look at human beings. That we don't do that for anything else. When we're looking at other healthcare issues, we want to talk about what is the quality of life for the patient. And we also the other crazy thing is, like, what other condition do we say, oh, there's one way to do it? That's
That's
it. What's
it.
that? You got You got hypertension. We got one drug.
We
You
got
take
one
it.
drug.
That's it.
And if it
it's
don't work, it's
crazy.
your fault.
Yeah, you're you're to blame. I actually was trying to get a billboard campaign going. I couldn't get people to buy into it, but I wanted to have someone like shaking their finger over a cancer patient saying, "You and
Uh-huh.
your damn cancer." Like so that's what I mean by willful ignorance, right? Like we're applying methodologies that made sense in the 20s. In the 20s, oh my gosh, this person, their liver is going to pop out of their chest. We got to
Sure.
do something to help their liver. Maybe they should have cessation of the thing that's making their liver bad,
Sure.
right? Like that makes a certain
It's
amount of
logical.
sense. However, well, that was 100 years ago. See,
Mm-hmm.
that's this country has a problem with time. I
Mm-hmm.
can do a whole thing on that later. But anyway, I think that we need to be looking at things that improve overall satisfaction. And when I'm on the Hill, I don't talk about all the touchy feely stuff. I talk about I talk about GDP. I talk about what the impact of getting someone from a position of incarceration, repeated involvement with law enforcement, trips to the emergency room versus stable housing, stable employment.
Mm-hmm.
That is a GDP win. That is
Mm-hmm.
on the order of about $100,000 a year. That is a GDP win.
Per
So
person.
right, per person, per individual. So we
Correct.
need to be looking at that.
Yep.
If we're just talking straight policy, we need to be looking at
Yep.
that. I happen to think humans are worth it, so I look at it a little bit differently. But there's no way to argue against it.
It's win-win. Humans are worth it and it saves money.
Mm-hmm.
We can all win, right?
Yep.
Okay, listen. You opened up and you were like, "Do we have 17 hours?" And I wish we did because you are preaching and I am definitely the choir. But let's roll into this last question, which I gave you the heads up on, and you have been schooling us this entire thing. I mean, we have a whole list of unlearns, undos, uncovers. But if you were going to bring it down to one that you want to be the last thought that people listening here from Phil Rutherford today, what would you bring it down to?
I think and I kind of previewed it. We have to unlearn that there's only one way.
Mm-hmm.
There's an infinite number of ways. We we have to undo the policies that are driving us into it. We are headed for, just as an aside, again back to the Hill. I This past year I've heard whispers of enhanced sentencing around fentanyl pills that are pouring into
Mm-mm.
black neighborhoods. We have to undo policy that unfairly incarcerates people,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we have to uncover a framework that is equitable for everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that kind of sounds Pollyanna-ish, but it is possible. It is possible to have human beings, some that use drugs, some that don't. It is possible to have them in a polite society. It can be done. Now, we don't have a lot of good examples in this country. We've got some stuff going on in Oregon that is an example of not really thinking out policy all
Mm-hmm.
that well. But
Yep. Didn't think it
but
through.
um, it can be done. I don't think it's a lost cause. So you said one thing, I gave you three, but you said
You know
unlearn,
what?
undo, and uncover.
Overachiever, under promise, over deliver.
Yep. Yep.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Phil. This is one, I learned a lot from you. I feel some kind of way that I didn't know about your organization, but now I know about it. I learned about 8 dimensions of wellness as a support organization that I can begin recommending for people. And two, you're motivational. And so what I hope is that people will listen to this and feel moved to learn more about everything you have begun teaching us about today.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. I want people to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Don't talk about it, be about it.
Hello.
Go do it. So
Go do it. With that, I'm going to roll us out of here.
thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you like this episode, please check out my book, Unaddiction: 6 Mind-Changing Conversations That Could Save a Life. Available at Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, Union Square and Company, Amazon, and wherever books are sold. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone you think may need to hear it. Also, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review. That helps us reach any and everyone who may be looking for support in the face of addiction.